Today we're going to go over the top 5 best opening traps for beginners. And here's a funny problem with beginners. Lots of the known opening traps do not work against them. So what's the catch here? Let me show you one example. Let's say in this position you play knight to d4, known as the blackboard Sicilian Gambit. You want to tempt white into capturing this undefended pawn on e5. And this trap may very well work against intermediate or advanced level players who will capture this pawn on e5, aiming to attack your f7 pawn as well, but then you suddenly counterattack with queen g5 and white's in trouble. Now, the problem with beginners, coming back to this position, is that after you play knight e4, they don't even see that this pawn is hanging, and that's how they avoid being trapped. And therefore, in order to give you something that truly works, I filtered the game, leaving only games of players rated 1000 and below that, and I check which traps actually work there and have the highest win percentage for you. So this is how I curated these top 5 best opening traps against players rated below 1000. Now, let's start off with the most common opening sequence of moves leading to the Italian game or the two knights game. And here, knight f6, guess what? The very known knight g5 right lever attack works wonders against that level of opponents. Most of them fall right into the trap, but nevertheless, let me share it with you, and there's also a little bit of a funny fact here. So here the wrong move is knight takes d5, but that's also the move that is most natural for black to play, because hey, that's just recapture. After knight takes d5, it suddenly allows white to blow up black's defense by playing knight takes f7. Now this forks the queen and rook, forcing black to capture, but after queen f3, white aims to double attack the king and the knight, and white wants to get their knight back and continue attacking black's overexposed king. The top move by black here is king to e8, and after bishop takes d5, there is something pretty funny. Now, the most played move by black here at this point is, you wouldn't believe, knight to d4. Now, that fails to this checkmating one queen to f7. Kind of scholars checkmate. So that's how you win a lot of games. This is actually the most popular sequence of moves, alright? So that's a sure win for you. Now, the second most played move for black in this position, besides knight to d4, is queen takes d5. Black simply misses the fact that the bishop is defended, and they drop the queen. So you win the queen that way, and you win the game anyway. Not many players know that something very similar can work against the Sicilian defense, which is also a very popular opening for black here, pawn to c5. Then you gambit a pawn with d4, entering the Smith-Morra gambit. Black usually accepts it. Here, knight c6, knight to f3. At this point, black realizes that if they try to develop a knight, it's kind of unpleasant that white can possibly push the pawn forward and chase this knight away. Therefore, at this level, the most played move by black is pawn to e5. Black wants to physically block your pawn so that it can never chase this knight away, and black is not worried about weakening squares because, hey, at this level, people are not that concerned about positional strategy things. So pawn e5 is what they play. You play bishop c4, and here, bishop starts exerting this strong pressure to black's most vulnerable square f7, and it's already somewhat unpleasant because you're ready to increase pressure by going either knight g5, same right lever stuff, maybe queen b3, putting up the battery that way, and black is already, I mean, they're not losing, of course, but they have already to be very careful. So knight f6 is the most played move, and after knight g5, whoops, we've got basically the same right lever attack, and it's bad for black because there is no normal way for them to defend this f7 square. In most cases, they play d5, and after you capture the pawn, white's position is already pretty good, you're attacking, putting pressure, but at this level, the most played move by black is knight takes d5. So they just panic, they don't know what to do, and they drop a knight for no reason. So knight takes d5 just gives away the knight. I mean, there is no way to justify that. Black is simply down the knight there, and they didn't solve the main problem anyway. I mean, the f7 pawn is still hanging, and that's how you easily win once again. Another fun fact that most players are unaware of is that you can actually mirror the right lever attack to the queen side. So here's how you do it. You open up with a queen's pawn move, pawn to d4. Black responds with pawn to d5 at this level pretty much exclusively. Then you play knight to c3, developing a knight. Black goes knight f6, and here comes bishop to f4. As you can see, you kind of play all the same moves. You bring the bishop out, you bring the knight out, all the same moves, but you just play them on the queen side. And at this point, very often your opponents will miss your main threat. They'll play knight c6 or something along those lines, missing the fact that you threaten knight to b5, attacking this vulnerable square c7. And although in this case you don't attack like the king directly, as it was with the f7 square, but this is still waiting for white. After knight takes c7, which is you're going to do, you're forking the king as well as the rook, and it's check to the king, it grabs the pawn, it's totally deadly for black. Still, they play pawn e5, trying to somehow desperately trade off your dark squared bishop, but you play pawn takes. You win a pawn already, you attack the other knight on e5, and guess what? Just by analogy with the previous move, the most played move at this point by black at this level is a suicidal knight takes e5. Once again, gives up a knight for no reason, and the threat is still real. So that's how you win easily, using the exact same tactics, mirroring it to the queenside. By the way, here at this point, the second most played move by black, if they don't play the suicidal knight takes e5, the second most played move is knight e4. Now let this be our puzzle of the day. So think about this position, and if you can find a move that gives white significant advantage, please write it down in the comments below. This brings us to the next question. What to do when your opponent tries to use the same right liver attack against you? And actually they will, because that's what they know. Now, after this opening sequence, what are you going to do? There is a very interesting move that I love a lot, and it's going to work tremendously well at this level. It's a move knight takes e4, a very sudden counter strike. And you actually aim to attack this f2 square just as well. You just counterattack it in this case. Now, what's the thing here? Well, if I were to capture this knight, that's no problem, because after d5, you inevitably take one of these two pieces back and you get a great position. It's much more challenging if white instead captures your pawn on f7. And in most cases, they will. Capture knight takes f7, forking your queen and rook, thinking that they have won the game. But here you play queen h4, and you counter-strike the same f2 square, threatening queen takes f2 checkmate. Now, at this point, your opponents will try to defend it somehow. Usually, for example, they'll notice that they can just play pawn g3, kick this queen away, and then grab this undefended rook in the corner. But then you surprise your opponent once again by sacking your knight on g3, knight takes. Now, if pawn takes on g3, that actually hands the rook on h1, and you capture it with check, and you win the game. That's cool. But f takes g3 looks a lot better for white. In this case, however, you shock your opponent one more time by playing queen to e4 check. Your queen swings over here, and it also hits this rook in the corner of the board, which is really unpleasant. Here I realize that if they just move the king, you're going to grab this rook in the corner, check the king, and continue your attack. If they try king f2, trying to connect the rook and the queen that way, that doesn't really work, because after bishop c5, you only add more fuel to your attack, and white still has to move their king back, and after that, queen takes h1 still gets you what you want. You check the king, it has to move, and you can probably win the game in multiple different ways. For example, knight d4, check the king, has to go forward, and then you can grab the queen, threaten queen takes c2, queen to e2, queen to c1, and you are already way ahead in material, so that should be easily winning. If you enjoyed this gambit and want to use it in your games, I would highly recommend that you check out my other video where I go in depth into this particular variation. Therefore, after watching this video, you can check out that one. I'll drop a link in the description. And here's the final trap that works really well at this level. After white has just played knight to f3, attacking your pawn on e5, instead of defending it with the traditional move knight to c6, you can actually leave this pawn undefended and go knight to f6. Your opponents usually will grab this pawn, because that was the intent of the move knight f3 in the first place, and now you go knight c6, aiming for the Stafford Gambit. Although more advanced level opponents are usually familiar with it, but at this level it works really great. Now your knight counterattacks this knight on e5, therefore it usually trades it off, and after this pawn on e4 is hanging. Also, you have a lot of diagonals for your bishops to be developed actively and to start your quick attack. Normally, white defends this pawn on e4 by playing knight to c3. You play bishop c5, just developing a bishop, also once again eyeing the same f2 square. And after bishop c4, guess what? You basically use the same fried liver tactics once again. You go knight g4, and there is still no normal way for white to defend this pawn without, losing something. And that's how you basically win the game. It's pretty simple. See that in all the cases we use the same tactics, which is cool. Because simple for you. Now, your opponents at this point will not see that something is going down. They'll think, okay, I wanted to castle anyway, let me do that. But after that, they walk right into queen h4, which makes things even worse for white. Now, queen takes h2 is a real threat, and also you're ready to capture this pawn on f2 with one of your pieces, and white is just defenseless. h3 is the only way to stop you from capturing that pawn on h2, but then knight takes f2. That attacks the queen and also sets it up for various discover checks on the next move, with this knight jumping somewhere, knight takes h3 or something like that. This forces white to give up the rook here, queen takes, and after king h1 you're already up material, and there are different ways for you to continue your attack. The fun way is to play pawn h5, not h6, pawn h5, and Your opponents usually will not figure out what's the point of this move, and they'll just try to develop, play something like pawn to d3. And in this case, you play the move bishop g4, and that was the point of this move pawn to h5. Now, this move attacks the queen on d1. The queen can now walk away easily because that exposes the first rank. Queen g1 would be checkmate. And if instead they try to grab your bishop, that's where our pawn h5 comes in play. We play pawn takes g4, and suddenly your rook that was dozing in the corner delivers the final blow, and this is a checkmate. Well, I can play bishop h6, but anyway, that's checkmate on the next move. Now you may wish to check out the video I mentioned earlier about this opening variation knight takes c4. I won numerous games with it, so can you. And if you want to elevate your chess beyond opening traps, then you may wish to check out this free masterclass that will help you elevate probably a few hundred rating points quickly within a couple months, because I nailed all the strategies there that you need to know on this level. Thank you for watching, hope it was helpful, talk soon.